Hello and welcome, crafty friends. In today's video we're going to be making a hello card following this sketch. Feel free to pause the video and take a screenshot now if you'd like to keep a copy for yourself. To get started on this card, I took a piece of smooth white card, put it on my grip mat and then blended on some evergreen bough distress oxide. All I wanted was a nice flat even coat of ink. If you want a nice solid blend like this, I find it really helps to have a juicy ink pad, so investing in re-inkers is a good thing to do. Once I was satisfied with my blending, I flicked on some water and then used a paper towel to lift off the water and some of the colour. This gave me a mottled background effect, just adding a bit of visual texture and interest. To dry this, I used my hairdryer and then I coated it in talcum powder because I wanted to heat emboss it. And the talcum powder just removes any static or moisture or grease so that embossing powder doesn't stick where you don't want it to. Next, I put my panel back on my grip mat and then put a stencil over the top. I don't think I've ever used this stencil before. It's certainly not got any ink on it or any other signs of use, so I thought it was high time that I did. I think it's meant to be like a cross section of a tree trunk or a tree branch, something like that. It's kind of organic and natural looking. So my idea for creating some texture and shimmer and shine on this card was to put some embossing paste through my stencil and then sprinkle on some embossing powder and heat it. So that's what I did. I'm using Liquitex light modelling paste and just using my metal palette knife to spread it on, being careful not to squish it underneath the stencil. I then poured over some gold embossing powder. I just dumped a load on one end and shook it down the other to coat the texture paste, and then I added a bit more on areas that I'd missed. After tapping it off to get rid of any stray bits and brushing off a few bits with a paintbrush, I heated it with my heat tool. And the really fun thing about this particular technique is when you heat the texture paste with a heat tool, it bubbles up, so you get some great lumpy bumpy texture in the embossing. I'd love to know if you've tried this technique before. Have you used embossing powder with something other than sticky embossing ink? And if you have, let me know what it is and how you got on, because I'm always up for more ideas. Before moving on to the next stage of this card, I did put this panel aside to let it dry for a couple of hours because I wanted to die cut from it, and I thought if that paste isn't 100% dry, it's just going to splurge everywhere. It's going to explode out from under the embossing. So as I say, I left it to dry and then I die cut out a circle. Now, this flattened all that lovely texture on the embossing paste, but I actually quite liked the way it looked. So if you want to do this and maintain that texture from the heating of the texture paste, cut your circle, then do the stenciling and the heat embossing. But if you want to get it to look the way that I've got it to look, which is really very flat, then run it through your die cutting machine after you have done the stenciling and heat embossing and left it to dry. So after I die cut my circle, I then glued it down on top of a second circle that I'd cut out of smooth white card. I used the next size up die, so that creates a nice stitched frame around my green circle. I then glued the whole thing in the top right corner of the card, overhanging the edge a bit. To embellish my card, I created 2 vellum flowers. Sorry, it's a little bit difficult to see because it's white vellum on a white mat, but all I've done is taken some 5 petal flowers and layered them up to create 2 flowers, one slightly bigger than the other. I then brought in my embossing ink and used my finger to lightly smear it on the edges of the petals of both flowers. This was because I wanted to gild these in gold. So once I'd finished the smearing, I dipped the flowers into my gold embossing powder, and then I took a paintbrush and just flicked away any bits that were maybe too solid or too close to the middle. After that, I heated them with my heat tool, and then I went in for a second round, just filling in any gaps in the embossing. To glue my flowers down, I put a dab of high-tack glue in the middle on the back of the flower. I wasn't bothered if it showed through because I planned to cover the centre of the flower with some Nouveau drops later on. And I positioned the larger flower towards the top and the smaller flower towards the bottom, and flicked up the petals a bit with my tweezers just to give them a bit of dimension. Next, I brought in my white Nouveau drops and added one in each centre. And I chose white to bring the white from the card into the focal point. For my sentiment, I chose a scripty hello die. I coloured a piece of card with evergreen bough again, die cut it out, and then used matte gel medium to stick it onto its shadow. To stick this down onto the card, I put a little bit of thin foam tape under the H and then a bit of glue on the rest of the back of the sentiment piece. And that meant that when I stuck it on, it would be nice and level. To finish off the card, I brought in some Nouveau glitter drops in Gold Coast, I think it's called. And I did that really because there was an awkward gap in the heat embossing towards the top and it just felt a little bit empty. So I thought a few Nouveau drops just dotted around here and there would fill up the gaps nicely, and they did. So that's this card done and dusted. I do hope you've enjoyed today's video and it's given you some ideas that you can use in your own card making. If it has, please do let me know in the comments, subscribe, ring the notification bell, leave a thumbs up, and I'll see you back here very soon for another video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.